Alright, this is going to be a quick guide and showcase on how to get sub 8-minute full clears at hard mode Sanctum of Rebirth. None of these methods rely on tier 100 weapons, and I will be using tier 95 necromancy throughout the video. These methods are extremely consistent, and if you follow them, you can expect the following kill times with little to no variance. 1 minute 30 at Vermyx the Broodmother, 2 minutes 30 at Kezalam the Wanderer, and 2 minutes 55 at Nakatra the Devourer Eternal. That's just shy of 7 minutes of combat. So as long as you're a relatively efficient banker and or you summon your conjures while running between bosses, you'll be getting 7.5 kills an hour and consistently making upwards of 210 million coins per hour as of the recording of this video. Just before getting into the methods, let me show you my preset quickly. I'm wearing my best necromancy gear and using a full book. The Scripture of a Masket is a fantastic cheap alternative. I've even managed to get a 247 on my Iron Man with that book using this method. My aura of choice is Equilibrium, as it lasts a very long time and means my kills will have very little variance or dependency on crit RNG. Majrat is another good choice, but I've personally noticed more consistency with my Scarab skips on Nakatra when I use Equilibrium. Notable things in my inventory include a Juju Gumbo and Power Burst of Vitality. Please review my previous video on Juju Gumbos and what makes them stand out as a food choice. I bring a backup Reaver pouch with extra scrolls, just in case I forget to heal mine mid-fight. I bring 3 rune pouches that allow me to cast Spellbook Swap Vengeance, Disruption Shield, and Prism of Restoration from the Ancient Spellbook to heal my Blood Reaver. I have 2 Portent of Restoration 10s. These can be bought from the Grand Exchange and are amazing to have for Nakatra's Obliteration attack. When you are brought below half health, these will activate and be consumed, healing you for 2300 HP, the same amount as a Rocktail, but do not penalize you by taking away your adrenaline. I have Dreadnips, which can optionally be used on Kezalam to keep him stunned and slow down his special attack pattern. Additionally for Kezalam, I bring a tier 95 wand and an Essence of Finality with the Obliteration staff stored inside. Note that the tier of the wand is not very important, as it isn't really being used for damage, but rather for the special effect of the Obliteration. The keen-eyed among you may have noticed the redundant Reaver's Ring in my inventory. This is completely useless if you're using the Equilibrium aura, but for those of you who opted to use Majrat, this is a great choice for the first 2 bosses that have no accuracy penalties, and even works for the latter half of Nakatra once her defense has been reduced enough. One final tip I'll share with you that pertains to your preparation is to have all 3 forms of HP boost active before you're going into Nakatra. These being the Bonfire boost, Thermal Pool from Uglug or Anachronia, and lastly, the 1500 HP boost from the Pantheon aura. You can get away with 2 of the 3, but this will be required for our strategy of tanking and reflecting the Obliteration attack. Now that the preset's out of the way, let's get into the tactics. I'll spend most of our time in this video covering the 3rd boss, Nakatra, in full detail, and slightly less on the first 2 bosses. The rotation and strategies used at Nakatra are quite unique, while the first 2 bosses require little more than a cursory knowledge of using necromancy abilities. There will be some useful tips that I've not seen mentioned anywhere else though, so I'm sure you'll take something of value from what you're about to watch. Boss 1, Vermyx. Just to reiterate, you can do this pre-build while banking and running through the portal, but for the sake of this video, I'll be starting all my pre-builds from a stationary point. This will also not be an ability by ability play-by-play, but the general outline of what you want each kill to look like. If you hit all of the important notes, all of your kills would be about 1 minute 30. Summon your conjures, extend them with life transfer, invoke death, command ghost, split soul, command skeleton, and surge into the boss. Start with a Death Skulls and Bloat, followed by a tier 90 weapon special attack, and then a tier 95 special attack. Use your Necrosis abilities and supercharged auto attacks as you see fit. This should finish the first phase of the boss without you getting any Moonstone shards under your feet. If for any reason you do get any Moonstone shards, I recommend that you place them along the edge of this divide between the middle room and the left side coil spawn room. That way, they won't block out any of the soul bomb spots, and you can use them to continue building stacks if the soul bombs are too far away to target a coil spawn. While running to each of the soul bomb spots, to the best of your ability, continue building adrenaline and prioritize gaining stacks of soul and necrosis. You can use Command Skeleton at the very start of the coil spawn phase to continue building your skeleton's rage stacks. It will do more damage in the later portions of the fight if you do that now. If the soul spawns are too far away from the coil spawn or your moonstone shards, feel free to use Divert. For the second phase, we'll try and do something similar to the first phase, just without Split Soul active. Use Bloat, a 5-stack volley, Command Skeleton, a Finger of Death, and a tier 90 weapon special attack. Once Vermyx starts nearing 300k HP, build up some souls and necrosis stacks while getting ready for the second coil spawn room. You'll most likely get moonstone shards, so again, I recommend placing them along the edge of the two rooms. Death and A-Pot right away, and use the coil spawn to build up to 100% adrenaline, 5 soul stacks, and 12 necrosis stacks. After dealing with the 3 soul bombs, split soul, return to Vermyx, and use all of your necrosis abilities the best you know how. Death Skulls, Finger twice, Touch, Auto, Volley, Finger, Death Skulls again, and finish off with most of your weapon special attacks. Boss 2, Kezalam. Like Vermyx, this won't be an ability by ability play by play, but rather going over the most important concepts and highlights of this rotation. If you follow these tips, you'll consistently be getting 2-minute 30 kills. I'm even showing you a clip from my Iron Man's POV, who doesn't use vulnerability as often as I would on my main account, to illustrate just how consistent this really is. We'll use the same pre-build as with Vermyx. Summon your conjures, extend them with life transfer, invoke death, command ghost, split soul, command skeleton, and surge into the boss. Optionally, you can deploy a dreadnought here and play around the stuns that it may or may not provide. It's not especially consistent or predictable, but it can sometimes delay some of Kezalam's special attacks. Ideally, I like to stand on this crimson tile here, with the slight curved flourish in the floor design. I've noticed that this makes my target cycle hit the western ice prison block, as opposed to the northern one if I stand elsewhere. I prefer that, as my skeleton will be closer and can instantly target that tile, which will help me get out of the prison faster. I like to start right away with a bloat and a tier 90 weapon special attack that will stun the boss briefly. Then tier 95 special attack, and try to do the best damage that I can with necrosis abilities and supercharged autos. At about 19 seconds, the ice prison will form, but if I can get in a command skeleton and refresh bloat just before that, that'd be ideal. The skeleton will make freeing myself from the prison a little bit easier. Freedom and target cycle, then any 2 abilities should free you from the prison. Continue using necrosis and supercharged auto attacks to phase Kezalam at 600k HP. When he gets to around 605,000 or lower HP, I like to switch to my wand and my obliteration EOF, and then cast that on Kezalam. It'll usually do about 3,000 damage, so it can be a good way of phasing him if he's already that low. This will prevent him from healing for the next 15 seconds, which gives us plenty of time to kill the healing pillar and move on to the next phase. The strategy for both pillars is to use Invoke Death, Bloat, Command Skeleton, Volley of Souls, and, if necessary, a tier 90 weapon spec or a 4+ stack Finger of Death. Phase 2. I like to use Split Soul, Bloat, and a tier 95 weapon special attack. I'll improvise in a similar manner to P1, taking advantage of necrosis abilities and supercharged auto attacks. Ideally, I'll also get in a 5-stack volley while my Split Soul is still active. At the end of my Split Soul, I'll usually refresh Bloat, Command Skeleton, and explode my zombie as I'm going to summon a fresh set of conjures to end the fight. By this point, the boss should nearly be phased, and I can use my wand and obliteration special attack once more on Kezalam. More often than not, I will get the 2 scarabs spawning right around this time. Since Kezalam won't be attacking me during the pillar portion, I'll use Disruption Shield and ignore the scarabs completely. One blast will be negated by my Disrupt, and I'll just tank the second one. It usually hits a 7k, but I'll be soul splitting all that HP back from the pillar anyway, so it's pretty moot. I think this is superior to using Vitality Potion here, as it would not be off cooldown for Nakatra if I used it now. I'll kill the pillar much the same way as I did the first, and then try to build up to 100% adrenaline. If my adrenaline is dire, after killing the pillar, I like to run melee distance to Kezalam and use Divert. I find his melee is more likely to hit than his magic attacks. In any event, once I'm 100% adrenaline, I'll go right into the best living rotation that I know how to do. I APOD at the same time and start blasting away with my Death Skulls and Necrosis abilities. I'll also use Split Soul here. And if my Zorgoth's Ring was kind enough to give me 3 or more stacks of soul, I'll throw in a volley of souls somewhere in here too. When the boss starts getting low HP, I like to finish it off with both weapon special attacks. One alternative P3 end that I'd briefly like to mention is if you skipped Scarabs, the next big special you'll get on P3 is the Moonstone Prison. You can free yourself as you normally would, but one possible interesting strategy would be to use Threads of Fate, Soul Sap, Volley, Sap, Volley. Since there'll be 2 sets of prison blocks all around Kezalam, you'll be able to get 5 stacks of soul very easily using Threads. Now that Kezalam is finished, now it's time for the real fun part. Boss 3, Nakatra. Make sure your hit points are above 11,000 as a baseline before entering the boss. If you see your HP is below that, refresh your bonfire and other HP boosts. Here's where the pre-build will differ slightly than the first 2, and where we'll start going with an ability by ability play by play. Important to note, however, that you may have to make slight improvisations or shift the order of some abilities around depending on your RNG with Zorgoth's Ring and Relentless procs. For example, sometimes I'm able to get 2 5-stack volleys in the duration of my Split Soul, speeding up my kill. Or I get a Relentless Death Skulls, and then I can do a weapon special attack earlier, while other times I must simply stick to the sheet. Being able to make some small improvisations like that is an important skill to develop in all PvM, but for today's video, I'll do my best to show you the foundation of this consistent sub-3 Nakatra rotation. Summon your Conjures, Life Transfer, Invoke Death, Command Ghost, Invoke Lord of Bones, Command Skeleton, and Ingenuity to Humans at the same time, wait 2 ticks, and surge in. Start with the very standard Necromancy opening. Death Skulls, Soul Sap, Touch of Death, Auto Attack, Soul Sap, Living Death plus APOD, Touch of Death, Death Skulls. Now, command your skeleton, Soul Sap, Bloat, Limitless plus Reflect plus Vidpot plus Vengeance all together. Make absolutely sure that you are full health here, and switch your prayer to Soul Split. Tank the first hit of Obliterate. Divert the second hit. Tank the third hit and eat some jellyfish. Optionally, you could switch back to Pray Magic for this third hit if you wanted to play more safe, but tanking it will result in more reflect damage. Continue your Living Death rotation with Soul Sap and your second Death Skulls. Use Touch of Death and then Split Soul. Use Soul Sap. This should now give you 5 stacks of soul, and the boss should be phasing at 960k HP right about now. 5-stack Volley. Finger of Death twice in a row. Then use your third Death Skulls to end your Living Death. Now, we're going to build our adrenaline back up to use Death Skulls and our weapon special attacks to phase into the Nephthys phase. The main principle we'll want to use here is to use Soul Sap, 2 abilities, Soul Sap, until we complete the phase. The way I'm going to recommend you do that is as follows. Soul Sap, Touch, Skeleton. Soul Sap, Devotion, Bloat. This lines up perfectly with the Obliterate attack. Soul Sap, Explode Zombie, Auto Attack. Soul Sap, Touch of Death, Death Skulls. Soul Sap, Volley, Tier 95 special attack. Depending on our HP here, you may have already phased the boss and skipped the scarabs. But if you haven't, your target is to get Nakatra down to 480,000 HP before she does her next wave attack. Improvise with some abilities and save your tier 90 weapon special as a last resort or for a finishing ability to hit the 480k HP threshold. You won't always need to use it, but it can make getting the scarab skip much more consistent. Nephthys phase. We don't have to be extremely precise with our ability order here, so rather than that, let me share with you the main principles of this phase and what our big objectives are. After phasing Nakatra, equip your Excalibur to delete your Condors, then summon new Condors. We're not going to kill both Nephthys in a single cycle before she heals them, so we're going to kill the first one while building a lot of stacks that we'll use for the second. You want to use Invoke Death, Bloat, and a Skeleton on the first Nephthys, while also building as many stacks of Soul and Necrosis as you can. When surging over to the second Nephthys, I find this to be the best time to command my Ghost again. Similar to the first one, we'll use Invoke Death and Bloat, now followed by a 5-stack volley to kill this Nephthys quickly. Finish it off with a couple basic abilities, then target Nakatra. We're going to try and get in a little pre-phase damage on her before going into the Shadow Sands realm. The timing on this is important. Nakatra will be immune to damage if not timed properly. If you time this right, you can get 3 damaging abilities off and extend your contours at the end of it. I like to think of this timing as hitting my ability right as the Nephthys is at his highest point in the air during his death animation. Once he hits his zenith, you want to use Finger of Death, tier 90 weapon special attack, and a Soul Sap on Nakatra. Of course, if you were very lucky with Sorgoth's Ring, you could substitute one of those abilities for a 5-stack volley, but this 3 ability combo is very reliable otherwise. Finger, tier 90, Soul Sap, and then Life Transfer. Now you'll be sucked into the Shadow Sands realm. The rotation you'll use in the Shadow Sands realm largely depends on your adrenaline and if you really want to juice for a PR or not. I'll tell you that the fastest rotation would be to do something like Threads of Fate, Soul Sap, Volley on the Salawaz, and then exit as soon as possible. And if you were to follow that, it's also debatable if you want to use Invoke Death right before you use Threads. I personally only go for this approach if I've entered the realm at a minute 40 or earlier, and I think that I might get a new PR. What I usually end up doing is very consistent and comfortable. I skeleton when I enter, Threads of Fate, Bloat, Soul Sap, and finish with basics. And ideally, I'll build to 80% adrenaline or higher on the gorillas while I'm clicking the 3 souls. I prefer this approach to the speedier strat, simply for the comfort of it. I go into the final phase with full adrenaline and full soul stacks, and it makes the final phase very relaxed. You'll still get consistent sub 3s doing this. Maybe you won't get a sub 245, but personally, this is what I recommend. Important to note for anyone who's opted to use Majorat and a Reaver's Ring. Inside the realm can be a good time to use another Invoke Lord of Bones before the final phase. That will make you accurate enough to use Reaver's Ring without penalty. The final phase, the dreaded 1 cycle. A lot of people find this very daunting, but with this method, it's crazy consistent. Do 1 ability upon exiting the realm, ideally something that builds stacks if necessary. Dive over to your hieroglyph, Living Death, Touch of Death, Split Soul, Death Skulls, Bloat, Volley. Now, start dumping all of your Necrosis stacks until Nakatra's Obliterate attack. Usually, I can cast my second Death Skulls and 1 finger just before this happens. Keep Soul Split up, Vitality Potion plus Vengeance plus Limitless plus Reflect. Tank the first hit, divert the second, and optionally, tank the third. It's probably safer to pray magic for the third, and to tell you the truth, I usually do that on my Iron Man, since I won't have the luxury of a Reaver Scroll healing me, but it is more damage if you can tank the third. This is where I've often chosen to eat my Juju Gumbo to tank that third hit, and to fish for a final Godbook proc. The Divert was super important, as now it will allow you to tier 95 special attack, tier 90 special attack, and Death Skulls again if you need to. Now you can just finish the boss with any of your remaining strong abilities. Congratulations! If you followed this guide, you've successfully performed a Scarab Skip 1 cycle hard mode Nakatra in under 3 minutes. And even better than that, you've learned to consistently get sub 8 minute full clears at hard mode Sanctum of Rebirth. That brings me to the end of this showcase. If you learned something new, improved your PR, or just enjoyed watching this video, leave me a like and a comment. Please consider sharing this video with a friend who might enjoy it too, or is also looking to improve their Sanctum experience. I'm also very close to 2,000 subscribers, so if you like high-level PVM, Iron Man, Clue Scroll, Completionism, and guide content just like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel. A special thank you to my channel members, and thank you to everyone who watches my videos. See you next time. Take care.